Hello everyone, welcome to ProAV. Thank you for joining us for our first live stream in a while actually, so thank you for coming back. I'm joined by not one but two guests, which is the first time this has happened in a while, but I'm joined by Tom from Canon. Welcome back, thank you for coming back.
Glad to be here.
And I'm joined by Rowan from Southpoint Fims. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, although I'm much used to being on the other side of a live stream than this side. So
aren't we all, Rowan? Aren't we all? But yeah, absolutely pleasure to have you here. So thank you for taking the time out, both of you, to come and do this. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. The reason we haven't done these for 4 or 5 months is that this is a whole new setup. We took the time over the new year to reinvent what we do, the way we do it. So I'm going to be showing a lot more about that over the next couple of months. But this is a entirely new live streaming setup. It might look very similar because we were intending it to look familiar and similar, but this is done in an entirely different way. We're now using Canon PTZs for this. We've, as you can see, changed the layout. We're going to see it evolve over the next couple of months with lighting changes and background changes and all this kind of stuff. But I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is if you see anything that looks a little bit unusual, if you see anything that isn't working quite as intended, please do let us know, because this is our first time properly putting it all to the test. As always, I can see your live chat as we go. I can bring it up. So welcome to the stream. Thank you very much for joining us. I can bring up like this. Thank you for joining us, George. Oh, actually, is that working? There we go. We found the first thing that doesn't work. Once Ben fixes that, I'll be able to bring up all the chat and ask questions as we go. I'll ask the questions anyway. So yeah, no saving questions to the end. Let's ask them throughout. But yeah, what are we here to talk about today, guys?
Well, yes. So we're here to talk about Canon's multi-camera solution, and particularly how me and my team used it at a really big music festival last year called Boomtown, which is, well, as I said, a really big festival down in Winchester, 65,000 capacity, and we had cameras across 2 different stages at the festival using slightly different setups that all utilise Canon's cameras.
So, okay, it sounds like such an exciting music festival, but let's move backwards a little bit. So Southpoint Films, you know, how do you get started? What kind of work do you do? Let's give a little bit of perspective for the people watching. Who is Southpoint Films? Sure,
yes, because yes, we're not necessarily a household name like like Canon yet. But yeah, so we're a production company based down in Southampton. Mm-hmm. We're a relatively small team. There's 5 of us who work at the business permanently, but we also work with freelancers as well. So for big jobs like Boomtown, for example, we can scale up and bring in more people as we need to. But yeah, we're a production company. We've been going for 11 years, and we work on a variety of different projects. So that would be, most of our work is probably sort of like your corporate video. That's how I'd describe it. So that's things like promotional videos. It's property tours. Like we do a lot of care homes, which is a bit of a niche that we have. We do a lot of educational stuff for universities, for schools, for STEM. We have a small studio, so we do some green screen studio stuff with teleprompters. And then we also do events, which is where we get into the live side of things. So on the event side, there's a lot of event promos, doing vox pops, doing interviews, but also, particularly pre-COVID, we did a lot of just going to events and recording conferences and filming people giving lectures, giving talks. We did a bit of live stuff back then, but it was always quite a hard sell because people always thought it would be to the detriment of their event if they were doing live streaming online. Gotcha. But following the pandemic, it became a necessity, and we've grown the live streaming side of things. So we do a lot of live production where we're going to like awards ceremonies, conferences, and of course music festivals, and providing the cameras for a live stream or for things like LED screens.
So out of interest in your normal corporate work then, that live multi-camera demand that you were talking about, obviously COVID changed everything for that kind of market. Have you seen demand amongst your customers stay level, dip off but still be at a good place, or how have you seen it sit after as the world has gone back to normal?
I think we've seen it hold. Yeah, the demand for live has stayed, and I think that it opened, people's eyes open to the fact that actually it's a really good way of doing video production, and we do a lot of things like webinars for clients, very similar to this, which is pretty much exactly the same sort of setup, is a few people talking about their subject matter. So doing a lot of webinar type things. I guess also the other side of that coin is podcasting. And then we also do like AGMs, we do conferences, town halls, and also just simple live streams of events so that people can watch them all over, particularly award shows, because with those, there's usually a lot of people who would like to be there but can't, particularly on a national level, so they can watch it from home, send it to their friends and family, and all sort of share in the celebrations of those events.
So how much of your work now would you say is that kind of category of work versus the more traditional sort of single camera post-produced workflow?
I'd say, at least in sort of turnover wise, it's probably about 40% live and 60% single camera.
I mean, nearly half that's an important part of your business.
Yeah, it is.
You notice if that went missing,
which I guess is kind of why we're here, but and we'll get onto with sort of when we talk about kit and cameras and that kind of thing, but why it's really important to us that when we're investing in technology, investing in equipment, that we have stuff that we can use across the board rather than necessarily buying stuff that fills a particularly specialist need. Obviously there are things that have to, like a Blackmagic A10 or something is only really a live production switcher, but particularly when it comes to cameras, any time that I see kit that we can use for both of those sides of production, I get very excited.
Yeah, no, absolutely, can see why. Okay, so let's move to Boomtown then. Is that the only music festival you do, or is that another sort of string to the bow, if you like?
Yeah, so we've done music festivals for a long time. Originally, we would get sort of brought in as crew by other companies, particularly companies that provide LED screens to festivals. Gotcha. So we did a lot of that for a long time. And it was really about four years ago or so that we got approached directly by festivals to provide a complete camera package. So that's providing everything from video switches to cameras to crew, and doing things like, not at Boomtown specifically, but other festivals, things like actually playing out sponsor reels and that kind of thing. Everything basically up to the point where we give an SDI cable to the LED guys and they put it up on the screens.
That's a big ramp up. That must have been a shock to the system.
It was, but we, I think as most people who work in video production know, you're backed up by your network of people, and we were really fortunate to know lots of people who could help us with these projects. And then over the last year or two, we've then been able to kind of use that work to then invest in it, and of course the corporate stuff that we do that's a bit smaller scale to then build up our resource for doing those bigger jobs.
Great. Okay, so before we talk more about the music festival, let's talk a bit more about the kit that you were using. So pre that change and the scaling up for Boomtown, what kind of kit were you using?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, it's been a variety of stuff.
Sure.
I mean, I've always been I've used Canon equipment for a long time, which is what we're here to talk about. Starting sort of 10, 11 years ago with a 650D, which is, I did a lot of work, professional work using that camera. Then moving up to like a C100, we got C200s, and until recently we had 3 of those. Right now we're using Canon R5. We've got an R5, an R5C, and 2 C400s, which is what we use for most of our work. We do also have some non-Canon kit as well, so we're not Canon exclusive. We've got 2 Blackmagic Cursor broadcast G2s. We've got some ancient Panasonic broadcast cameras, some old Sony sort of camcorder, broadcast camcorders as well, and of course lots of the stuff that Canon doesn't do, like Insta360 degree cameras, drones, GoPros, so we've used a lot of different manufacturers over the years, but I found that we always end up gravitating back towards Canon.
What does gravitate you back towards?
Oh, it's quite hard to say, because it's not necessarily a tangible thing. It's not like we're looking through specs and comparing, but I think it's just that we like them. And I know that I can give particularly until recently when we were using C200s, we could give them to people and they'd just go out and use them and we'd get really good result back. There wasn't such a big learning curve. I think people found them easy to use. Our crew and our freelancers haven't really had to spend much time onboarding people onto the cameras, and particularly when we're doing high frequency work, which is most of our stuff. It's in the nicest way, it's high frequency, low budget content, we're moving very quickly, and so we need to get people in at short notice. We don't have time to go, okay, let's sit you down for a day and go through how this camera works. I've just always found that I could give someone a Canon camera and they'll get on with it and deliver a really good result, and it's similar enough to other kit that they may have used if they're not Canon shooters. So if they've come from Sony, they know how to use it, and if they haven't had experience with that sort of level of camera before, they just get to it quite easily. Yeah, that's really why I think it is. And we're really happy with the result. Also love the autofocus. It's a big part of our workflow since I had the C200, but even with the C100, which was the first one with the DAF autofocus.
Started with just that one little box in the middle that you couldn't move.
Which was, you had to have a paid firmwire to
yes,
unlock
even that was a paid firmware.
With selected lenses, but it was the start of something, and we've now look at it now.
Way, haven't we?
Yeah, it's so
things have changed a lot.
They have, yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's move to the spectacle that is Boomtown. This I've never been, but it looks insane.
Yes.
Like spectacle is the right word. It's not a normal music festival, is it?
No, I think you'd call it more of it's like more of an experience. It is a music festival at its core. It's all about the music. It's in the name, Boomtown. It's all about music. But I don't know if we could get the image up, but it's very theatrical. The stage designs are incredible. There we go. So you can see sort of the scale of this event. And also, as well as an event itself, it's an immersive, almost, I'd say, theatrical experience. They build a whole theme around each year. They have actors there who are playing different roles, and you can go in. I mean, if you've ever done any like immersive theatre stuff, which is there's quite a lot of it in London, and it blends that in with the music festival. So it's a very cool event.
Spills out from the stage and into the. Because how many stages are there? That's not the only stage. That big one we just saw.
No, so we did 2 of the main stages. I think there are about 10 main stages, maybe even more than that. But it's a 65,000 capacity, and I think the 2 stages we worked on each respectively could hold 20,000 people. So it's big, and it's very, very exciting. It's it's a very good event. Okay,
so I think we've got a film to show to get started talking about Boomtown, because this was something that you kind of approached you to. Oh, I guess maybe Tom, you should explain.
Yeah, of course.
This is a Canon case study, right?
Yeah, this was a Canon case study to show how Canon cameras were used within a live events and production environment. And Rowan was a perfect person to take it on board, because you already knew he worked so well with our kit. So it was a great opportunity as well to see the C400 just after launch at the head of a stage.
That's a good point, because of course the C400 has been launched for quite a while now.
Yeah.
You know, when was this all filmed? This was
at the time. I think we had 3 C400s, because I shot the video on one of them, and that was 3 out of the 5 we had in all of the UK. So
wow,
it was definitely close to an exclusive. I mean, from my experience shooting the video as well, it was fantastic fun seeing this sort of environment. I've never seen a festival like it, but this hopefully should give a great idea of how all the pieces came together, and some of the content that Rowan's team were capturing with these sort of cameras.
Okay, so let's give this a watch. So it's about 4 minutes long-ish, so it's not too long. If you've already seen this before, don't worry, we'll be back very shortly. But it just gives a really good flavour of what it is we're talking about.
My name's Rowan. I run a video production and live streaming company called Southpoint Fims on the south coast of the UK. We're here at Boomtown, one of the biggest festivals in the UK, to provide cameras on 2 of the main stages, Grand Central and Origin. Across the 2 stages, we've got a mixture of cameras. We've got PTZs, Cinema EOS cameras, and also camcorders as well. On one of the stages, Origin. On this stage, we went with PTZs only because it gave us a dynamic approach. It allowed VJs or the touring artist team to come over, tweak the cameras as they saw fit, and it gives us a great image that can be integrated with their show.
I love the flexibility of the PTZs. We had a dedicated operator who was controlling the PTZs and racking the cameras, and they were able to control the cameras as they saw fit, but also our director could operate some of the PTZs as well, allowing them to line up a shot and then cut to it all in one motion. One of the things I love about using PTZs is that they're flexible and versatile. They don't necessarily replace a person, but they sometimes let us do things that a person couldn't do. For example, in this scenario, we would often be asked by some artists not to have any camera operators on the stage with the performers to avoid them being distracting. And because we had PTZs, it meant we could still get all of the shots we wanted without having anyone in the way or compromising the show. I've been really excited to have an outdoor PTZ on this project. This PTZ we could place anywhere around the stage. It was discreet with no operator, and it also meant that we could leave it anywhere without worrying that it was exposed to the elements of British weather. The other stage, Grand Central, is where we had a broader variety of cameras. This stage had big, lively bands, and we wanted to make sure we could capture those in detail. On this stage, we had a couple of PTZs, a camcorder, and 2 large sensor Cinema EOS cameras. The reason we chose large sensor cameras for this stage is because we really wanted that cinematic image, both on the stage and when we swung the cameras around to get shots of the audience. There were times when me and the other team backstage were looking at the multi-views and just crying down the comms at how beautiful the images were looking. I love the C400. The fact that I can take it from a small corporate job all the way up to being in the pits at a major music festival with a cine servo zoom, broadcast demands, and even tally for the operators is just so versatile. I think this camera is going to be my all-rounder going forward. An instrumental technology in our production was Canon's XC protocol. I've been familiar with this for a while now through the PTZ range, and I'm so glad it's come to their other cameras. With relatively affordable Ethernet cable, we can plug all of our cameras into the same network and control it all over IP using controllers and other software. The XC protocol allowed us to rack all of our cameras so we could control things like the white balance, the shutter speed, and all of the other settings on the cameras from backstage. We actually had an operator dedicated to this using Canon's IP1000 controller, and they were also controlling some of the PTZs as well, including their pan, tilt, and zoom functions. In multicam productions, it's essential that all of your images look the same. You can't go back in the edit and change it. What's happening is happening live on the screen and people will see it immediately. You have to do it right as it goes out. And I knew using Canon's cameras, we would get a consistent colour across all of the cameras with very little effort on our part.
I mean, that it's so colourful, it's so vibrant, there's so much energy in that place. It must have been so much fun to do. I mean, it must have been a huge amount of work, but what a great place to work, right?
It is incredible. We've done it for 2 years. So this year that you just saw was our second year doing it, and it just doesn't. Your impression doesn't change. You know, every time I've been, you're just like, oh, this is incredible. And every few years they change the stage designs, and so yeah, I'm hoping we go back this year. But I know there's going to be a new stage, and so we'll be quite excited to see what that looks like.
Absolutely.
But I would just say massive credit to Tom there for capturing that, because he did. That's all his work. He did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, obviously mixed in with a lot of Rowan's team's footage in there, but yeah, great fun, that one for sure. Absolutely.
And are you happy with the way that it ended up looking? I think it looks incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you heard me in the video, but we genuinely that's all genuine. It wasn't like I put that on for the video.
Tom didn't write your script.
No. He was there, but I was free to say what I wanted to say, as I am now. And yeah, no, seriously, we were backstage, for the whole weekend, even when Tom had gone, and we were like, this just looks incredible, especially the 2 C400s with the Cine Servo lenses. Which just like this, as a team, I don't think any of us had worked on something in a live production, at least at a festival, where we've been able to make something that looked that nice, especially that shallow depth of field stuff. I mean, just felt unreal, and it yeah, we were just like, this is what we want to be capturing. You know, like when you set out on a job and you're like, what's the best it can be? We felt like we were getting there. You know, there's still areas we'd love to improve on a job like that. You know, I think, and there's areas that you can always lift up productions. You know, I could get carried away and say, yes, let's get a jib in, let's have a live drone, let's have a spider cam, whatever. Like, there's loads of places that we could probably push it, but at least in terms of the core of what we were doing, I think it's definitely one of the, it's the best quality we've ever gotten at a festival.
And to say that the team you had was actually quite small to pull that off.
What did the team look like?
Well, I guess it's probably worth chatting, about the nuts and bolts of that. Obviously, some of it was covered in the video, but just to kind of expand on it. So we had 9 cameras across the 2 stages, 4 on the Origin stage, which was the big Stonehenge one, and then 5 on Grand Central. Operated, I mean, the crew kind of shifted throughout the weekend because we needed more on Origin for the opening of the show. So where I mentioned that Boomtown has this sort of theatrical element to it, they do a big opening and closing of show. And the opening of show is like this big performance. It's all choreographed with dancers and singers and a song that they've written themselves for Boomtown that usually they release as like a single later on. So it's a big part of the show. So for Origin, for that opening of show, we had 3 people on the stage. But then throughout the rest of the weekend, there was actually nobody on that stage. And it was all self-service with PTZs for VJs who were coming in. Because most of the time for that stage, it's DJs. And they usually just show kind of graphics and visual art as they perform. But they wanted the flexibility to add cameras in for the ones who maybe didn't have such a big production, but also who maybe wanted to blend it in with some, funky graphics that you see at higher end, performances, which Boomtown obviously is one of the biggest for that genre of music for the sort of those DJs. On the Grand Central stage, which is the big orange one, we had, I think it was 4 crew. But we also had a 5th person, which most of the time was me, who was able to go back to Origin and sort of like offload footage and that kind of thing. But we had a director and then 3 camera operators, 2 of whom were on the C400s in the pit, and then 1 who was backstage in the gallery, who was doing the sort of the racking of the cameras, making sure that they were all looking consistent, but also controlling the 2 PTZs that we had over there as well.
Okay, so to count 9 cameras, the majority of those PTZs and 3 C400s, did you say?
2 C400s.
2 C400s.
We had an XF605 as well.
Okay, cool.
We have got a few pictures of those as well. So on the Origin stage, they're backstage. They have the IP100 PTZ controller. But then, on the actual cameras themselves, you've got an indoor M300 there, which you use some very clever magic arm rig.
Yeah, I love this.
It's just clever.
That's why I love it.
But
It's
it
not clever at all. It's just a magic arm suspended out 90 degrees. It's great.
And we talked about this when we saw, you saw the picture. It is just a Manfrotto magic arm with a super clamp. But these cameras are really lightweight. I think because we weighed them to make sure that they would be supported by this. I think they're only 1.5 kilograms, which I think there's laptops that are heavier than that. So they're really lightweight. But also just works really well because, as you can see there, you can clamp it onto the scaffolding on the infrastructure. That's the front of house for this, which is for people who aren't experienced in like event terminology. That's where the audio desk is, the lighting desk is, the island basically in the middle of the crowd.
The big tower in the middle of the crowd,
And so that's hanging from front of house. But also as well, we were able to use super clamps and magic arms as well around the DJ booth and put the cameras around the DJ booth as well so they could get shots of the artist close up. So,
and also, presumably, it gave it a bit of protection from the elements as well because you were booming it. Is that why you wanted it in rather than the look? You wanted it
That's exactly why. Because if we'd have had it just where that clamp is, it would have gotten destroyed. As Tom said, these are indoor cameras, and I will say that, we're not necessarily advertising that you go and buy these to stick them outdoors in the rain. But this was sheltered enough that we were happy with it. But speaking of the elements, we did have an outdoor PTZ as well, the X300, which is the same camera in terms of its technical spec. So the image quality is the same, the sensor's the same. It is fundamentally the same camera, but it's an outdoor version. The difference being that it is completely waterproof. Tom may give me like an asterisk on that. But as far as I'm aware, it's completely waterproof.
It's IP rated.
Yeah, so we can leave it outside at a festival.
It's got a windscreen wiper. I mean, that
Exactly,
tells you everything you need to know about the camera, right?
And we were so excited when it arrived at the office for us to sort of prep this job. It was the first thing I set up, and I pushed the button and showed everyone. I said, "It's got a windscreen wiper," and we were just amazed. And really, that does justify the higher cost, because if we had, if we'd been less fortunate or maybe a bit less careful with our N300s, which are the indoor ones, we could easily have written them off. Over that weekend, we had rain, we had mist, we had cold weather, like really cold nights, even though it was a hot August weekend. You know what British weather is like. You get the extremes. And I think if we'd have been a bit less careful or a bit less lucky, we could have probably written those cameras off if we'd not been careful. So the 300, that's really what you're paying for. And I think if, for me, as someone who buys kit and uses it, that's the reason why we'd buy the X300s, and definitely why we used it in that particular location, because it just stayed like it was in that picture, sat on the stage for the whole weekend.
Absolutely.
Just out in the elements. We didn't have to worry about it.
The thing is, it's not even just the rain. You don't think about the amount of dust at these festivals and like bugs that crawl onto the lens, and all of this. Like just having that windscreen wiper just to remove anything that's on that lens and give you a clear image back. But I mean, I know that the X300 is used across a huge range of really large outdoor festivals now. So it's becoming kind of a go-to for that really solid outdoor PTZ. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, again, to take a step back a little bit, when you got this job, I mean, we've talked about how you were using Canon up to date, but presumably this was much more equipment that you had in house anyway for this. This is a ramp up job. Were other brands in contention? What was the decision behind ending up where you did?
Yeah, so we did Boomtown the year before, and truthfully, we didn't have any Canon products on that iteration of the job.
Okay, well, what did you use?
We had some Panasonic PTZs on Origin, and on the other stage, and some Blackmagic Ursas as well, the Ursa Broadcast G2s, the one we bought them for that job that year. And then on the other stage, we'd hired in some Sony system cams. I can't remember the exact model, but they were all SMPTE or coax based that we used. So I've been using Canon PTZs for a while now. I mean, we're still in the scheme of things relatively new to using them. Up until Boomtown, that is profiled that we're talking about now in 2024, we only had one CRN 300. I bought a couple more ahead of Boomtown to fill out what we needed. So we're still relatively new to having a handful of these PTZs. And then on the Grand Central stage, because we'd hired stuff in before, I was open to looking at what we would need this year. That's when I was talking to Canon, having worked with them for PTZ stuff in the past. Tom said to me, because I've been talking about the fact that I bought some Ursas the year before, and truthfully, and I don't want to turn this into like me being negative about other cameras, because we're not trying to compare cameras here. And I will say just off the bat that as someone who buys kit and uses different kit, I actually feel really grateful that we have options. There are so many different brands.
Not just a few options either.
Loads. And truthfully, there's a baseline for all of them that is really good. There is no bad option unless you get into the weird fringes of Kickstarter. But if you go Canon or Sony or Blackmagic, you're still going to get there's a baseline of quality you're going to get. Anyway, with my little disclaimer done, because I'm aware there's a live chat here, and truthfully, we're not trying to compare cameras particularly. But when I was told, we've actually got a product that would do that role, I wasn't really sure, because my experience had been, as I said, 650D, C100, C200, and none of those cameras jumped out to me as cameras that would be really good in a live production environment. Yeah. And then I saw the C400 and I was like, okay, yes, this is really, there's a lot of thought in this to make it a really good broadcast, or at least live streaming camera. Starting with the fact that it's got the support for these high-end lenses. Like we have this one here.
And this is your camera?
This is my camera. Well, my production company's camera.
Oh, sure.
But yes, my camera. So it supports the Cine servo lenses, which I hadn't really had any experience with before. This camera here currently has got a CN7 on it, which we've just purchased. It's a lovely lens. It's sort of the little brother of the lenses that we had at Boomtown, which was the CN8 and the CN10. The difference between this one and the CN8 mainly is that this one doesn't have the doubler in, which means that we just have to use it in Super 35 mode.
Yeah, so this doesn't cover the full frame sensor of the C400.
But that's fine for, you know, what we're looking for, and also just the price that I was able to get this for compared to the options we had for CN8s. It made sense for us to go with this one. But yeah, we can use lenses like this with the C400, which we couldn't do with any of the other Canon cameras we'd had previously. And of course, as we'll talk about in due course, this camera can also be used for the XC protocol as well, exactly the same as the PTZs, and also an increasing number of other Canon cameras as well, which means that we can actually control the cameras using an Ethernet connection over IP, where we can control things like, you know, the ISO, the shutter, the white balance, basically every setting really that you'd want to control while the camera's operational, as well as also even things like, if depending on the lens, things like the zoom and focus of the lens, you get complete remote control over it, which is amazing, which we didn't have access to on any other Canon cameras before. So yes, to answer in a very long way your question about why we decided to go with Canon, the opportunity presented itself, and I was like, well, we're already using the PTZs. We love the PTZs. They're great cameras. We've really gone to them. We're already Canon users, and if we can fit a camera that fits the same class as cameras we've already had, so obviously the C400 is a very different beast to the C200 in many ways, and it fits a different area of the product line, but from my perspective, it's pretty much the same sort of price as what we paid for those C200s. It's the logical next step for that camera that really has kind of gotten to the end of its, you know, life as a product that Canon sell. It was the next step for us. I was like, yeah, if we can use this for all of our work, from corporate promos to being in the pits at a music festival, it's a no-brainer to give this a go and see how it works.
So moving to this from the Ursas and the Sony system cameras that you were using before for Boomtown, what has been the main differences, either aesthetic or quality of life as an operator, do you think?
I think, I mean, I'll compare it to the Ursas because I know them better. The Sonys were just brought in for that job. Right. But compared to the Ursa, I mean, I really like the fact that you can do control back to it over IP. Yeah. It just simplifies things a lot because we give it an IP address and it's on our network. We can control it from different software. We can use different remotes. Ourselves, we have the RC IP 100 controller, which I think is the entry-level controller that you can get for PTZs and anything on the XC protocol. It also goes up to the IP 1000, which is the bigger one that has a screen, big screen on it, and is all singing, all dancing. So we've got much more flexibility with different controllers. You can even control it with an app on your computer. Canon make a nice multi-camera app that just runs on your Mac, and actually I'm using that. I've got it on this computer here, so I don't know if you can see it. It's quite subtle, but I can zoom the lens in and out. Don't know if you can see it there, but
well, if we cut to our close-up camera, we probably can.
There you go. You can see the ring moving.
There we go.
So I can just control it from my laptop, which is incredible. I don't need any extra hardware. I've literally just plugged my laptop into it with an Ethernet cable. Crazy. So it's really flexible, which I feel other systems aren't, and we don't have to run expensive SDI cables back to it to control it. Yeah, we just use relatively cheap.
And you've got Tally, right?
And we got Tally, which I've got on here, which I can turn on and off because I'm using a piece of software called BitFocus Companion to talk to it, which is increasingly becoming glue for all kinds of productions. And
as an operator, you've even got Tally shown on your third-party Atmos monitor at the back.
I do, yes, which is something that I wasn't able to do recently on the Ursa. I plugged in a screen and thought, oh, that'd be great. The operator can see the Tally on their monitor. And no, you have to use the first-party one. So I just thought this is just so much more flexibility. So yeah, I'm very happy with this camera. It gives us a lot more, for me anyway. And I think the other thing as well, looking at this as an investment, and again, I'm reluctant to draw too many comparisons directly to other cameras, but if I do use the Ursa as an example, which is a fine camera, but I would say it's just a fine camera, whereas I love this camera. I would say just the fact that I can use this across so many different productions. It's got incredible autofocus, which is great for your interviews. It's also just great for general shooting as well, because especially...
Do you use it on a job like Boomtown?
Autofocus probably not on Boomtown, not for in the pits, but the video that Tom made where he did have a C400 and he was going around getting shots of us I'm sure 100% had autofocus.
So all of the B-roll that you see of the operators and all of that was all C400 with I think 24-105 and the 50mm 1.2, but all with AF primarily pretty much. But whereas the photo we've got on this slide here, you'll see the CN8 with the C400, and you'll notice one of the operators here is using a zoom and focus demand, which is kind of the more standard thing you'd see at a festival. And that was same with the CN10, which was the other C400 and the lens being used there.
But as you can see, that's basically the same setup. Here
exactly. Yeah.
Canon servo lens on the front, C400 in the middle, and a third-party monitor on the back.
And we have got a few examples here of the footage that was coming out of the cameras as well. So, I mean, as Rowan's kind of saying, like the images they're getting out of this was, I'm sure you can vouch for it yourself, Rowan, but they were fantastic. And that's kind of one of the reasons why large sensor cinema cameras are becoming a really big thing for live events as the main A cameras. And I can just flick through some photos here, but...
And I think it's worth pointing out as well, like the sensor in this is just fantastic with it's the triple base ISO, which is very marketing word, but it is what it is. It's a triple base ISO. It means that when it's pitch black at night, we can stick it to 12,800 ISO and we're getting beautiful, crisp imagery. And this isn't, outside of Boomtown, we've been using this camera for all kinds of events. We were doing an event in Winchester Cathedral a couple of weeks ago where it was a really moody kind of art music event, very exciting, but it was pitch black. The lighting, they had these big kind of whales that they were hanging from the cathedral ceiling, and it was an event for the University of Southampton, blending art and music together and humanities, science, etc. Had these big whales hanging from the ceiling that were all illuminated inside themselves, but actually in the performance space there wasn't much light because they wanted the ambience to be all around these big this big installation. And so we actually had this exact setup with a CN7 that we'd hired from a local production company before we got this one, and stuck it to 12,800 ISO, getting lovely footage from it that was usable in pretty much pitch black. So
I mean, I actually remember when before the performance we recorded with Sleaford Mods. So this particular photo here, this is a screenshot from the video, and that was coming out the C400. And I remember going up to the cameras to check, and we had actually set them to 12,800 base ISO because we was using a variable aperture, big cine servo lens. We needed that extra light on the sensor. So all of the footage that was shot at night at that festival was all base ISO 12,800. I actually remember we had to drop in an ND filter to bring the exposure down slightly, just to dial it in and get it right. So I was using an ND filter at night.
Rewind 5 years, this would be an insane conversation to be having, really, isn't it?
But obviously having triple base and having 10 stops of ND, which obviously in a bright day also helps on the other side of things. But in this scenario, it was for keeping the exposure down, but at night.
So we're starting to get some really good questions come in. So I'm just going to quick fire through some of these. Lots of them left by our good friend George. So thank you, George, for the questions. His first one, there we go. It says, follow-up question, what's one piece of equipment that would make your life at Southpoint Films easier, Ryan? That's a tough one.
That is a tough one. I mean, at the moment we're eyeing up a van, which isn't something that necessarily
Not a sexy purchase, is it? But no, it's pretty practical.
It is very practical. So we had one, and annoyingly it got stolen. So that's how it goes.
I guess it depends. Is it a current piece of kit that you've recently purchased, or purchased in the past, or is it something that you'd like to buy next?
Yeah, I think to answer the question seriously with something about camera gear, I think I'm really excited to get my hands properly on one of the new 24-105 power zooms, the RF ones, because there's a huge amount of potential in those. Obviously, we've bought this CN7 because we want to use it for our broadcast style work and our live streams, because you've used similar lenses like at Boomtown. We've hired this lens, and it was the right lens at the right price at the right time.
Sure.
Had it not been available, we would have gone for the 24-105. And the thing that's exciting about that is I feel like it could offer us exactly the same as this, but in a more affordable package. When you compare new prices, as a more affordable package, also is potentially a bit more flexible because it's full frame, but also we can use it across all of our jobs. We can use it for corporate promo videos, interviews, getting B-roll, but also stick the grip on it and a demand and use it for live streams. That is a very exciting piece of kit for me, and I think it will probably be one of our next purchases.
I mean, you're absolutely right. We use it all the time. It's lovely. It's a really nice middle ground between the 24-105, you know, the ordinary photography lens that we've all used a million times, and something like this. But I mean, this is a 10 to 20 grand lens. You know, this is not small change in anyone's book, even the largest production companies. And so having something like the 24-105 that can be that middle ground between the two.
Yeah.
So do you see yourself using those alongside lenses like these lenses for some cameras and those for others, or is it a backup? Or
I mean, I don't think we're going to buy another CN lens at the moment. So we've got two C200s. I would probably use them together, and I think it depends on the job. But I mean, the thing that's exciting about that is it gives you a power servo zoom lens at a very affordable price for what it is. You know, as you said, these are 10 to 20 grand. You know, you're not going to spend that much on those power zooms. But also as well, they're quite exciting for people who are using other RF lenses, other RF cameras. We shoot on R5s. We can use it with that. If we've got a job where we need to travel really light, but we still maybe need to do some event stuff, like filming someone at a conference, and we need to have the camera set up for a long time, we could even use it with those cameras as well. So I think there's, I mean, you probably could just find a way to use this with an R5, but you wouldn't. And so I think, that's where that's quite exciting.
Of course, the RF 24-105 is a hybrid lens as well, so easy you can go and use it for photos. And I mean, there's a photo here on the slide, and you can see on a C80 there how small it is if we're comparing to the CN7 here, which obviously they're two different beasts, like completely different types of lenses. However, having that power zoom on a lens of that size, I think really opens up what you can do at the more affordable end of the spectrum as well.
Yeah, it's our go-to, even just for the simple YouTube videos that we do here. You know, it's our go-to run and gun lens. You know, there's documentary style lens. If it's controlled in the studio, we do primes, and if it's uncontrolled out and about, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So, more questions. Florian says, very interesting, thanks. Were your operators on easy rig or shoulder rig for these long sets, and what comms do you use on those loud stages?
Good question. So they're all on tripods. So that, all tripod based. We couldn't really get someone to handhold for the whole day. So all tripod based, and we have in the past done some sort of roaming camera stuff, but usually we swap operators for each set, so no one's getting too fatigued. So and we do this anyway a lot of the time on even sort of festivals like this where it was all fixed positions, but quite often we'll rotate people around positions just so they don't get too bored as well, because if you're in the same place all day every day for 3 days,
glaze over.
And festival days are long, they're like 12-hour days, and obviously that's quite intense, and just giving people something a bit different to do can just stimulate again and get
creativity going.
Exactly. So all tripod based, and when we have done handheld, just shoulder rig and just get them to rotate between sets. The other half of that question was about
comms. What comms do you use on those very loud stages? Because they must be loud.
They are. So we're still relatively new to this in the scheme of things. As I said, we first started doing festivals ourselves about 3 or 4 years ago. So if you actually think about how many events we've done, it's like 4 or 5 events, or well, maybe more than that, like 10. But festival season's very short, and if we do them, 3 or 4 a year, it's not that many. So we're still using sort of relatively entry-level stuff for comms. For this particular one, we were using a Hollyland Mars T1000, I think it is. I was
just about to say, have you used the Hollycat? Land ones?
It was, it's their kit that is a base station with 4 belt packs.
Yep.
And then we buy 3M Peltor ear defender headphones, which then the operators use. So they're we have got a picture here of one of our operators, if we can get it up, wearing those headphones, they're headphones, but they're ear defender headphones, aimed mainly at the construction industry. But they have a 3.5mm jack that goes into the Holyland belt packs. They can't talk back to us because they don't have a mic. You can, I think, get a mic for these, but they're a little bit hard to come by. But yeah, I find that generally operators don't need to talk back to you, and especially at a festival, even if they try talking to you, you just hear coming through the headset. So generally, we get operators to communicate visually on camera, so nod, shake, and zoom in and out if there's a big problem and we run out and go and see what's going on, or get them to come back to us and explain what the issue is. So yeah, that was our comms setup. On a lot of sort of, you know, bigger production companies will use things like Clearcom or it's Bolero, Riedel Bolero, and so that's sort of the next step. But some of those kits start at, you know, tens of thousands of pounds, so you've got to be using them every day, and you've got to have a need for something that big. For us, I mean, music festivals as a technical setup are actually quite simple. There's not that many moving parts. It's cameras and it's vision mixing, and then sometimes a bit of VT playback with sponsors. So for what we're doing and the level we're at, the Holyland stuff was great. One little tip that I will add onto that is from the base station, we actually run out cables that extend the antenna, so we can then put the antennas under the stage right where the operators are, so we don't get any interference on the signal. And when we've done that, at some festivals, we've actually been able to run them right to the base of the front of the stage and get comms to the operator who's at front of house when we've had a operated position there.
Because there must be a lot of interference or something like that, a lot of phones going around.
Potentially 20,000 people with phones and Apple Watches and stuff all there, you know, throwing out Wi-Fi. So yeah,
I can vouch that phone signal there was non-existent. So
no, definitely don't use like a cloud-based comms for a festival. That would be insane.
George also asked, while using the C400 for Boomtown, did you come across any quirks or interesting settings that you'd not seen before?
Ooh, don't know. Nothing that jumps out. I mean, I think the thing for us was just the fact that we could have it all on the same controller. That's a bit of a boring answer because we just talked about that, but that was the revelation, really.
In my opinion, that's a question that you should get a boring answer to. If you get a boring answer to that, you're doing your job right. At least they're doing their job right.
I mean, in a way, that kind of links into what I was going to talk about with the gallery and backstage. So maybe we should elaborate a bit more on XE Protocol.
Yes, we keep coming back to XE Protocol being the thing that Rowan was the most impressed with. We haven't really explained that, so let's go over that.
So, I mean, well, Rowan, if you want to start with IP1000 and what your setup was backstage, and then I'll explain kind of how that then cut in with XE Protocol.
Yeah, sure. So particularly for Grand Central here, we had a RCIP 1000. This is the sort of the pro controller for Canon's XE cameras. So PTZ's C400, C80, C70, C300 Mark II, basically anything that supports XE. We had that there with all the cameras plumbed into it. We had an operator there who could pick which camera they wanted to control from the panel, and then they could control all of the camera settings: white balance, shutter, gain, ISO, probably even more when you dive into the settings, but that's really the stuff that you want to change. You can turn the NDs on and off, so you can set that to a different level. Yeah, basically just all of the stuff that an operator would control, because we have done festivals, a lot of festivals, where we've had cameras that haven't been remote controlled, particularly our older cameras that have gone on these sorts of jobs. They just sit there and you're relying on the operator to change things, and stuff can change constantly. The lighting's always changing, the sun comes in, the sun goes out, particularly when it gets cloudy, you know, on a day with a lot of wind. Settings are changing all the time, so having someone there who can just quickly dial everything in, you cut to one camera, change to the next one, cut to that one, then you can change the others.
I literally remember as you just set up the XE Protocol and this communication, and I think I was just chatting to one of the operators and I was going, you do know you can just tweak the white balance on the C400, and they're like, what? I don't have to go up to the camera or ask the operator, oh, can you just tweak the colour slightly, the sun's gone in. Like the fact they could do that with not just a PTZ, which is where people, you know, see these sorts of controllers. You could actually do it with a full-blown, you know, cinema camera. was really where it was.
And get the
standing
peace
out.
of mind, being able to sit back and it's a set in the central point in front of house and see. I know all of mine are set to what they're set to. You know, that must give so much peace of mind.
Exactly, and I literally remember Rowan, whilst he was on the comms doing more the vision mixing and directing, he just went to his operator on the controller, just went, oh, it's a little bit cold on that camera because of the angle it's at and where the sun is. Can you just warm that shot up a little bit? And he just did it there and then he could cut straight to it.
Great.
And I've got lots of memories from years gone by where we've done festivals where we've had like a locked off camera at front of house. When you get to the headline act, you can't get there because there's so many people, 20,000 people potentially all stood between you and where your camera is. To go over there and tweak, you know, the iris because it's gotten dark is near impossible.
If you're going to send someone, that's someone gone for like
20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not even joking. That is, it's like they're gone for 20 minutes. So yeah, remote control is really the big thing. And yeah, I mean that's what. Truthfully, I loved my C200s. I've told Tom when I've worked with him before, I was like, you're going to have to pry them from my hands to get me to get rid of them because I loved that camera so much. It just was a great form factor. And delivered great results, and I didn't see a reason to upgrade it. And the C400 convinced me mostly because of the fact that we could use it this way with the remote control. And, you know, it's much the same form factor. It's a form factor that Canon have had on a few different cameras like the C300 as well. It's a great form factor, very similar sort of setup with the way the screen comes out and everything.
It's
and
a very
workhorse.
familiar form factor to a C200 owner.
Exactly. And then to add on this extra feature, which just gives us a whole different dimension to what we do on the live side, that. Yeah.
So as a long-winded answer for what I was trying to answer, what XC protocol actually is effectively a language which is IP-based, but it basically means that not just our Canon PTZs, it also means that a range of our professional camcorders and latest cinema cameras can all talk together over a single Ethernet cable, or even Wi-Fi. So cameras with built-in Wi-Fi like the C400 or C80, or if you use like a Wi-Fi dongle on some of the other cameras, they can all communicate to a single network, and it can all be controlled from one PTZ controller or even laptop if you're using the free application. So as Rowan said, you can literally have a Cine servo lens that you can control the zoom of from backstage or the back of a room, wherever you are. And there's just a full list of, you know, all the compatibility. So there's already a huge range of products, and it keeps getting added to as we obviously release new products as well. So it's very exciting. It unlocks a lot of opportunities. And I know, Rowan, well, you was telling us earlier a bit about some of the examples of where you've used it as well going forwards after that event, after you've purchased some C400s on the back of that.
That also leads on to just general kit. All of this stuff we're talking about Boomtown here, but this was presumably like the PTZs and things kit, which you now own and are going to be using in all sorts of elements of your company, right?
Yeah, we spent quite a lot of money on this stuff in the last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, we're very keen on this. We've been Canon shooters for a long time. This is a big upgrade for us to straddle two big parts of our business that didn't really link together before. The PTZs are very much on the broadcast side, but we have used them for like multi-camera event coverage, purely for recording, not necessarily for streaming. We have got a picture here of an event that I did a couple of months ago, a university lecture. In and of itself, a relatively small event compared to Boomtown. And I had the C400 set up as a nice wide of the venue. I had two PTZs for capturing the person who was talking, and also for getting some like audience shots as well. So there was one down at the front looking back. It was a great setup because for me as a solo operator on this job, I mean, truthfully, maybe I could have turned up to this job with two C400s and, you know, had them just sat next to each other and hit record at the same time and zoom one in and manually operate it. But I wanted to take it to the next level, and being able to actually run it as more of a live production meant that, first of all, I had a faster turnaround. I was able to actually edit the whole thing as the event went along. So at the end of the job, I just, you know, took the SSD out of my ATEM, took it to a computer, topped and tailed it, and sent it off. Whereas if I'd have done it the traditional way of just set up two cameras and record, you know, I would have then had to go back, edit it, probably taken a few hours, maybe half a day's worth of editing time taken up. But I was able to do it live. And also by having them all networked together using XC, I had my RC IP100 controller there. I was able to make sure all the settings were the same. I didn't have to get up at any point throughout the event to go and check on any of them. I could just look at the controller, go, okay, the white balance is all the same. The ISO is looking good across all of them, or the gain, and just look at my multi-view and change it all from there, which is just so convenient. So for us going forward, I mean, we do a lot of events, a lot of projects which are like PTZ projects. And I guess there's probably a whole live stream to itself just talking about PTZs. But traditionally, when we started using PTZs, we were using them with our C200s, and it very much was a case, or even when we did multicam with just C200s, it was very much a case of, okay, someone run round to each camera, make sure all the settings are the same. Oh, the lights changed, right? Someone run round, change the iris, and you'd be on comms back and forth, like change that. Oh, that looks right, that looks right. Well, now we can just plug them all into the network and just tweak them all from a controller. It's incredible. And PTZs in themselves as well open up a whole different opportunity, which, yeah, as I said, could probably be a whole live stream to itself.
It absolutely could be a whole live stream. We're getting to the end of the hour, so I don't want to go too down a rabbit hole here, but it does bring me back to George's very early comment, which I've sort of glossed over. Sorry, George, but he said, do you think the current videographer term will become more of an operator of PTZ cameras in the future rather than the typical camera person? Which I think is a fascinating question. I don't see this as being something that needs a different designation. We're all just camera operators. We operate a camera, whether it's that camera or that camera or that camera or that camera.
Yeah, and PTZs, right? As Rowan said before, aren't here to replace people. They're just another tool in the arsenal, and sometimes they are required and they give you more flexibility, especially having the option to physically move them, which obviously you still can't do with a C400. Well, without like a Xanos head, which is something else as well. But
so I guess, Rowan, do you think with Boomtown you hired less people for your coverage than you would have done if you weren't using PTZs, or do you think you just had more cameras with the same people?
The latter. Yeah, right. More cameras, same people, and that's been the case for, I think, most of my PTZ jobs. Even that example I gave of the lecture, so it could have just been me on my own with one locked off camera and one that I operated. But instead I was able to take 3 cameras, and it gave me a much better result because I was able to get different shots that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. I could also do automations with the PTZ, like some soft zoom ins, zoom outs, all that sort of thing that wouldn't have been possible if I'd have just been on my own with 2 cameras to look after, and I was also able to mix the job as well. So PTZs, I don't think, replace people, because that job would have been exactly the same in terms of crew, and my role would have been much the same. In the scheme of things, would have been much the same. I just changed what I was doing slightly. I think as a broad thing, I don't think PTZs are going to replace every camera, because there's still so many times where, particularly in videography, I don't really like that word, but I don't think anyone does, but in videography, it is still very much person driven. You've got to have that flexibility to put a camera on a gimbal or move it handheld and set up a tripod for an interview, and a PTZ doesn't have, it would need wheels on it.
We all know that every single job is not planned well enough to do the entire thing on PTZ.
No, but even in a live production scenario, there are still definitely times when you want people to operate a camera. Something like a music festival absolutely requires the flexibility of a person to move that camera around. And not to say that PTZs are limited. I actually had a conversation with a client literally a couple of days ago when we pitched a hybrid approach of cameras and PTZs for their event. They're like, oh, I don't like the sound of it, because we called them robotic cameras to make them sound cool and innovative. And they're like, I don't want it to be robotic. It needs to be organic and natural. And I'm like, no, it's not robotic in the way that the footage comes out. It's just that they are effectively little robots you can control. I
think you made a really good point when we was at the festival with the front of house, because last time you were saying how you used an old Canon box lens on there, and you literally had someone stood there, not quite literally 12 hours, but obviously between breaks and everything, but you had someone literally stood on that front of house for the whole thing and just doing the old like left and right, up and down, zooming in. Whereas you had, as you see on the slide, you had literally clamped onto the scaffold on the front of house, you had just a PTZ, and this was like your main wide shot of the stage, and the image sold itself. and you save someone's legs and
and it reduced our
helps.
footprint in a really busy part of the festival as well. Like when we had the box lens there, it was in the way the year before, massively in the way. There were people with spotlights wanting to come and use that space. And we're like, well, we've got a camera there, and they're like, we didn't know you were going to have a big camera here. You're like, okay, well, we have. So, and then you get people kind of walking around it, well, not necessarily walking in front of it, but you run that risk, and something so small and discreet. So the benefits of PTZs, PTZ shouldn't be looked at as something that you should worry about impacting your job if you're someone who's already a camera operator. It's very much something that supplements it and actually gives you more creativity, because as I said, you could be one operator controlling 2 or 3 or 20 cameras, which you can't do if you're using, sort of normal cameras. I don't know how you call them, but like a C400. If you have 20 C400s, you really need 20
I think particularly
operators.
For those like smaller production companies that are looking to, upsell to like different services and different customers. I think if you've got a fleet, but at least a couple of PTZs alongside whatever your main camera is, I think you can then sell yourself for a lot more jobs then because of the variety.
George has jumped in clarifying, and it sort of leans towards that. He said, I didn't mean really as a replacement. Rather, if you don't learn the skills to operate PTZs, do you think that it would result in you being left behind in a way? I guess he's thinking, as an operator, should he be learning?
I think,
this stuff?
There's no harm learning, definitely. I think it's really going to help if you say, I can operate them. I mean, the nice thing is with our PTZs is they're actually quite simple to get to use. It's more just understanding a little bit of basic IP knowledge to set them up.
The IP knowledge is definitely a big barrier for people. It's more simple than people think. And also just access. This is not something that people can just run over to their colleague's house and play about with in the same way as you might with a cinema camera or something like that, or a mirrorless camera. What I would say on that point is, come in and speak to us. We've got pretty much one of the only places in the UK where you can see a huge variety of the industry leading PTZs side by side. It's all here. We've got staff to talk you through them. If you're unfamiliar with PTZs and you're just wanting to go, what am I looking at here? Come on in, have a play. We can just leave you alone with them for a few hours for you to get your head around them. It's absolutely fine. That's what we're here for. Because it can be intimidating. Did you find that?
I think initially it can feel that because they feel very different to any other camera in the sense of like they look very different, and you know that you don't just stand behind it and move a tripod around if you're going to use them. But actually, when you do use them, you set up the remote. When you're looking at a screen and you're using the remote, it's not really any different to using any other camera. It's just slightly a different format. And
I think Canons are the ones that feel the most familiar, because I come from the same world. I'm not from that world at all. I don't know anything really about networking, and of all the PTZ brands that I've had to learn how to use doing this job, Canon has been the one that has felt the most familiar, just with the terminology, with the way that the menu systems on the browser remote are laid out. It feels like one of their camcorders rather than something entirely different and like an engineer's camera.
I mean, we literally say that, and it is literally the guts of some of our professional camcorders that have been put in a robotic head. So the actual image and everything else out of it is the same, and we've tried to make sure that the browser remote has that similar feel as a regular camera.
And think about it, why wouldn't you? I mean, you've spent a long time and many years refining the menu system and all the rest of it, and the way that cameras are built for that. It's still a camera. Why throw away all that work?
Yeah.
And the IP stuff is only becoming more common across lots of products. Like for me, I had the background of working with things like Blackmagic ATEMs, which if you're not using the minis and the extremes, which are quite easy to use because they've all got the buttons on them, but if you're using anything like a Constellation or any of the older ATEMs which didn't have basically any of the rack-mounted ATEMs, you kind of have to get your head around a bit of IP stuff anyway. So if you've got a bit of experience with that, adding the PTZs in doesn't necessarily, it's no more complicated, I think.
And we're not talking about complex networking. We're talking about very simple, bare bones. What is an IP address? What's a static IP address? And how do you create a closed-off network to point those IP addresses towards each other?
And
that is it.
Keep it independent from whatever's in your office or your home or like elsewhere on site. Plug it all into an Ethernet switch, and as long as it's all together there, it's actually quite easy.
And worth me pointing out, like I just said at the very beginning of this stream, the reason we haven't been doing this for a few months is 'cause we've been building a new setup. This is what we've been doing. All of these cameras that you're now watching are controlled using XC protocol. We've got a Netgear switch sat on the editing desk over there, mixing desk, and all of this is exactly what we are now doing for this as well. So it absolutely works. George has said, does ProAV or Canon offer education on the PTZ side of things? I assume it requires quite a bit of learning in a way. Not official. Does Canon offer any official education?
Not officially. Obviously, we do quite a lot of trade shows where we will show off, a lot of our kit, and you can obviously come and ask any questions. We do actually have an educational piece that we did with Rowan, actually. So it's on the Canon Europe YouTube channel. You just go on there, I'm sure you can find it if you search Canon how to PTZ. And
well, let's put a link for it in the comments of this when it goes live.
Literally a full-length rundown of how to set them up, how to use the laptop application, how to use the controllers. It literally goes through all of them from a beginner's point of view. So it's a good starting point for sure.
Perfect. And like I said, just come in. All the kit lives here. Just come in and spend a bit of time here in the ProAV showroom. That's what we're here for. We're here to help people get familiar with kit. That's our job as a reseller. And so that's absolutely fine. I think that's a really nice place to wrap up now. We've reached the end of the sort of time slot. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but thank you so much for that. That was a really good chat and some fascinating work. So thank you both so much for that.
Absolute joy. Thank you, Carl.
No problem. Thank you.
Let's do some more in the future. But yeah, this is going to be available to watch live. So if you've got any questions when you're watching this after the fact, please just leave them down below. We'll send them over to these guys. We'll get answers for you. So absolutely, if you have any questions watching this, answer away down in the comments. And of course, if you want to buy any of this, head over to ProAV. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you very soon.